All right, welcome back to another episode of Always Adaptive. I'm your host, Randall James, and today we are answering the question, is grass-fed, grass-finished beef all it's hyped up to be? As Americans, we love choice. We love to feel like we're in control and we're making good decisions. But the reality is this is mostly an illusion, and most people do not pay close enough attention to anything to really know what is in their food or how the animal was treated prior to slaughter. I was motivated to get into this because of a video Kason Granger posted where he says, realizing that the grass-fed beef patties I've been buying are not actually grass-fed because they don't clarify that they're grass-finished is tragic. I then wrote in his comments, this is exactly why you stop worrying about it. Beef is beef. I then had comment after comment coming in with a riveting defense like, beef is most definitely not beef. Do you even Merca, bro? Or wrong again, they have a different nutrient profile based on their diet. It makes a huge difference, bud. And then my personal favorite, you are wrong, bud. Fantastic defenses, if you ask me. And so in typical Randall fashion, I started doubting my opinion, and the only other logical step was to make a video about it. So what are the major claims that we need to break down today? Number one, grass-fed beef has a higher omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio. What this is referring to is the idea that omega-3s are anti-inflammatory while omega-6 are pro-inflammatory. We need both, but according to some studies, the ratio is suggested to be around 4 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3. Number two, grass-fed beef is lower in total fat. Number three, grass-fed beef is higher in many micronutrients. And then number four, there are some animal welfare and environmental claims. I'm not going to get into the morality and politics in this episode, perhaps in another one, but the focus of this one is going to be on fat and micronutrients because I'm saying beef is mostly just beef, not that certain beefs are morally and ethically superior. If you're choosing grass-fed for those reasons, I got nothing for you here. Do what you want to do. I really don't care. The context of Kason's video, though, was that they weren't grass finished, as if that was going to make a huge deal nutritionally, not ethically. But yeah, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes. We're going to start with omega-3s. When people hear omega-3, they think they're doing their body a favor just by grabbing grass-fed beef. But what kind of omega-3s are we talking about, and how much do you actually need? And also, is beef even a good source of it at all? Let's start with the real good sources. Fatty fish and oils. There are two types of omega-3s that we can use as humans, EPA or eicosapentaenoic acid, and also DHA or docosahexaenoic acid. That's the only time I'm pronouncing those this video. So just remember EPA and DHA. EPA is the one that's mostly responsible for anti-inflammatory effects, and DHA is the one your brain and nervous system rely on. It's literally part of your cell membranes. Now you can get a plant-based omega-3 called ALA or alpha linolenic acid from things like flax seeds or chia seeds, but your body barely converts that into the more useful EPA and DHA. And here's one more problem. Men are even worse at converting it. Estrogen actually helps boost the conversion enzymes. So women, especially premenopausal women, do a much better job turning ALA into EPA and DHA. But if you're a guy, the conversion rate is way lower. So you've got to get it directly from fish or supplements. Remember this, ALA, because we're going to come back to it in a minute. So how much omega-3s do you actually need? According to the American Heart Association, the average healthy adult should aim for around 3.5 grams of EPA and DHA per week. That's based on eating 2 servings of fatty fish like salmon or sardines. Each serving gives you about 1.5 to 2 grams, so it averages out to roughly 500 milligrams per day. You heard that right. 2 servings of fatty fish would give you all the omega-3 you would need for the entire week. Now you might be thinking, what about grass-fed beef? Doesn't that have omega-3s too? It does, but here's what the numbers actually look like. A 100 gram or 3.5 ounce serving of grass-fed beef contains around 80 to 100 milligrams of total omega-3 fatty acids, while grain-fed beef contains closer to 30 to 40 milligrams. That's about 2 to 3 times more in grass-fed. So yes, grass-fed does have more, about 2 to 3 times more, but it's still a tiny dose. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll just eat more grass-fed beef to hit my omega-3s, let's do the math on that. A 100-gram serving, 3.5 ounces, of grass-fed beef gives you around 100 milligrams of omega-3s. The American Heart Association recommends 3.5 milligrams per week. You'd have to eat over 7.5 pounds of grass-fed beef per week to hit that target. That's more than a pound a day. But wait, there's more. Almost all of that is ALA, not EPA and DHA, the kinds your brain and heart actually use. So yes, grass-fed beef has more omega-3s than grain-fed and also a higher omega-3 to 6 ratio, but let's not kid ourselves. It is a terrible source. Stick with fish. I want to show you a comparison of omega-3 content across multiple different food sources. Wild salmon contains between 2,000 and 2,500 milligrams of total omega-3s per serving. That includes 500 to 1,000 milligrams of EPA and 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of DHA. Mackerel has 1,800 to 2,200 total milligrams of omega-3 with around 400 to 800 EPA and 400 to 800 DHA. A 1 gram fish oil capsule delivers about 1,000 milligrams of total omega-3s with 180 to 500 milligrams of EPA and 120 to 400 DHA depending on the brand, and you can even choose the distributions now. Most brand names have multiple types of fish oil comprised of like varying amounts of EPA and DHA. All of those fish sources have 0 ALA, which is fantastic. Your body will nom the shit out of those omega-3s. Now let's go on to beef. Grass-fed beef contains 60 to 100 milligrams of total omega-3s with only 10 to 20 EPA, nearly 0 DHA, and 60 to 80 ALA. Grain-fed beef provides 30 to 50 milligrams total with around 5 milligrams EPA and nearly 0 DHA and 20 to 50 ALA. Lastly, I just want to look at a couple plant sources. 1 tablespoon of flax seeds or chia seeds each contains about 2,350 milligrams of ALA, no EPA or DHA. This even relates to vegans that may be trying to get good sources of omega-3s, and they may be looking to flax seeds and chia seeds, and it's like, hold on a second, that's ALA, and the conversion is really bad, especially in plant food. We have an even harder time extracting nutrients from high fiber foods like chia seeds and whatnot. So at the end of the day, this equates to very small amounts from beef and even smaller amounts for people like me who eat super lean ground beef. I will always go at least 93.7 and even 96.4 if I can find it. I'd say I'm probably 60% 96.4 and then the rest I'll probably find in 93.7. That equates to tiny amounts of omega-3s. There is one last point I want to make about the omega fatty acid profile between types of beef. Let's talk about what actually happens when you cook your omega-3s. Most people see a number on a nutrition label, like 2,000 milligrams of omega-3s, and they think, great, that's what I'm getting. That's what it says, so that's what I'm getting. But that number is actually for the raw food. Once you cook it, especially at high heat, things change quite a bit. Fish takes the biggest hit. That's because omega-3s, especially EPA and DHA, are polyunsaturated fats, and those are chemically fragile. Every double bond in a fat molecule is a weak spot. The more double bonds, the more unstable it becomes when exposed to heat, light, or even oxygen. Saturated fats have 0 double bonds. They're rock solid. Monounsaturated fats like olive oil have 1, more flexible, but still pretty stable. Polyunsaturated fats, however, like omega-3s and 6, they've got multiple double bonds, which makes them highly prone to oxidation. So when you're grilling salmon or pan frying anything with delicate fats, you're not just losing fat content, you're potentially creating damaged fats. Fats that were supposed to lower inflammation can actually turn pro-inflammatory when they're oxidized. This is where the conversation starts to bleed into seed oils a little bit. Seed oils are also loaded with polyunsaturated fats, but instead of EPA or DHA, they're packed with linoleic acid, which is an omega-6. Linoleic acid has 2 double bonds, so it's not quite as fragile as DHA, which has 6, but it's still unstable, especially under heat. And let's be honest, seed oils are often extracted using hexane and other toxic solvents. So I totally get the concern when it comes to that stuff ending up in our food, but there are expeller pressed oils now. I recorded a deep dive video on seed oils. If you're interested in learning more about seed oils and hearing my take on a very polarizing topic, you can watch that video here. But here's something I want you to think about. If you're hell-bent on 0 seed oils, not that I'm going to make this a seed oil video, I promise, but it is relevant. If it's the case that there's no longer any hexane involved in expeller pressed oils, and that means that there's no need to heat treat the oils before they get to your food, because that's why they heat treat them, to dissolve the hexane so that we don't eat it. If it was the case that these were expeller pressed and there's no heat treatment and no hexane, would you still be against the seed oils? I'm putting this here because it's a good opportunity for a critical thinking drill. If the real issue is the molecular structure, the double bonds and their instability, that's what everyone talks about, then doesn't it logically follow that you'd also have a problem with omega-3s since they have even more double bonds? So what's it really about? Is it the molecule or is it the context? Anyways, if not for the omega-3s, then what's the argument for grass-fed beef? Let's talk about the micronutrient differences between grass-fed and grain-fed beef, because everybody loves to say grass-fed is more nutrient dense. but rarely do they show you the actual numbers. While some sources do report slightly higher mineral content in grass-fed beef, at least one controlled study showed the opposite. Magnesium, potassium, and iron levels actually increased after grain finishing. This was a 196-day study on Angus Hereford steers published in the Journal of Animal Science. Researchers split the cattle into groups and fed them a high-concentrate grain-based diet, except for the day 0 group, which served as the grass-fed control. They then harvested the meat samples every 28 days and analyzed nutrient composition specifically from the longissimus muscle, which is your classic ribeye area. There was a 24% increase in magnesium compared to the grass-fed baseline. Potassium also went up from about 19.3 to 21.97 milligrams, which is about a 14% increase with extended time on grain. And even iron saw a modest bump going from 0.56 milligrams in the grass-fed group to roughly 0.60 milligrams during the grain finishing. That's about a 7.1% increase. Another study entitled Pasture Finishing of Cattle in Western U.S. Rangelands Improves Markers of Animal Metabolic Health and Nutritional Compounds in Beef saw a few differences between grass and grain-fed beef as well. This wasn't just a basic nutrition panel, though. They ran a full metabolomic analysis on the muscle tissue of these Angus cattle, measuring over 1,500 different compounds to see how pasture versus grain finishing impacts nutrient contents. Here's a few of the things that they found. There was no real difference in vitamin B1, which B vitamins are often touted as one of the major differences between grass-fed and grain-fed beef. Both grass-finished and grain-finished beef had about the same amount of B1. Then we have vitamin B6. Surprisingly, grass-finished beef had 24% less vitamin B6 than grain-finished. But grass-finished had some clear wins too. Vitamin C. Grass-finished beef had about 0.3 milligrams more per serving than grain-finished. Not massive, but measurable. And then also vitamin E. Grass-finished beef contained 350 micrograms versus 120 micrograms in the grain-finished. That's about 230 micrograms more per 4-ounce steak, a 3 times increase. However, most of this undermines a common talking point about grass-fed being more nutrient dense across the board. You've got to look at the actual data, not the marketing. And do you know what all of that means? It means absolutely nothing. Those differences are biologically irrelevant. The RDA for vitamin C is 75 to 90 milligrams. A grass-fed steak gives you less than 3 milligrams total. You'd hit your target faster licking a piece of fruit. Same with magnesium. Your daily target is 300 to 400 milligrams. That grass-fed steak gives you about 24 milligrams. That's not even 10% of what you need. Even omega-3s, which get all the attention, only show up in about 100 milligrams per steak. Compare that to 2,000 milligrams from salmon, and it's not even a contest. So grass-fed does have slightly more of some nutrients that don't matter, but also slightly less of a lot of nutrients that do matter more, like B6. But it doesn't matter because most are present in trace amounts either way. You're not getting meaningful doses of anything unless you plan on eating 3 pounds of ribeye a day, which I definitely don't recommend. If you like the taste, the ethics, or the environmental angle of grass-fed, go for it. But don't let anyone sell you on the idea that it's some sort of multivitamin disguised as a steak. Now, I want to start to land this plane. The last question that I had was, how reliable are grass-fed labels? First, the difference between grass-fed and grass-finished. Grass-finished means it was pasture-fed its entire life cycle. Most people see grass-fed on a package, though, and picture a cow living its best life, grazing in a field somewhere until the day it dies. What the truth is, however, is that that label means almost nothing unless it's verified. The USDA used to have an official standard for grass-fed beef, but they pulled it back in 2016. Today, producers can slap grass-fed on a label as long as they claim the cow ate grass at some point. That's it. There's no required inspection, no enforcement, and no definition that everyone actually follows. So technically, a cow could spend a few months or less on pasture and then get shipped off to a feedlot and fattened up on corn and soy, and it still qualifies as grass-fed. And even 100% grass-fed still doesn't mean the cow was grass-finished unless someone's actually checking. And the only way to trust the claim is if the producer goes through the USDA's process-verified program. But again, that's optional. So what labels can you trust? The labels you can look for if you do care about this are the American Grass-Fed Association. They require 100% grass-fed and grass-finished with no grain ever. There's also Certified Grass-Fed by AGW, which stands for A Greener World. They verify both diet and animal welfare. And sometimes you'll see USDA process verified, but you have to read the fine print. That label means nothing unless the company actually spells out what was actually verified. So yeah, most beef labeled grass-fed, it's probably not grass-finished. If it doesn't say 100% grass-fed and grass-finished and list a certifier, there's a good chance that that cow ate grain before harvest. The bottom line here is that you cannot trust the label unless a certifying body is actually checking. So my final thoughts are this. I'm not here to tell you to change the type of beef you're eating. I'm here to challenge your why. I know I said I wouldn't get into the ethics and morals of it all, but one commenter brought up to my attention the fact that grass-fed cows can even be malnourished, which flies in the face of the idea that grass-fed cows are somehow treated better. One could make a pretty compelling argument that grass-fed beef isn't automatically more humane or nutritionally superior, which I've already made the argument for, especially if the pasture is poorly managed. Yes, grass-finished cattle can be malnourished. Here's how. In the spring, potassium-rich pastures can cause something called grass tetany, a magnesium deficiency that can lead to tremors, collapse, and even death. In other cases, cattle raised on selenium-poor soil can suffer from white muscle disease, a result of low vitamin E and selenium, both of which are hard to come by without proper supplementation. Also, forage-only diets are often low in key trace minerals like copper, cobalt, and zinc. So unless the rancher is managing forage quality year-round, rotating pastures, and actively supplementing minerals, you could end up with a cow that's technically grass-fed, but undernourished and less healthy than a well-managed grain-finished animal. I would say starving an animal with insufficient nutrition is definitely less humane than bunching a bunch of fat, well-fed cattle up together. But that's another topic for another video. Hopefully, I've made you challenge your existing beliefs in thinking grass-fed and finished beef is superior and left you with a tool you can use to challenge claims you hear online. Look up studies that measure the claim and then look at how much of that said nutrient we are actually supposed to have as humans to see if it even matters in the first place, because most of the time it doesn't. Hopefully, I've shown to you that beef is mostly just beef. This all ties into the fact that 95% of your health is based on 4 big pillars: fitness, sleep, total nutrition, not individual components, and stress management. The rest of it is really just bullshit. If you're carrying 60 extra pounds but worrying about grass-fed beef, I got news for you. You are doing it wrong, my friend. But that's it for me. My name is Randall James. I'm a strength and running coach, and this is Always Adaptive, a business born from the idea that we are always adapting. Literally, right this moment, whether you're sitting or standing, that is an input into your nervous system. You're adapting to that. Every time you eat certain foods or partake in certain activities, you are adapting to that. So control your inputs and you can control your life. I will see you at the next one. Stay adaptive.